Welcome to Gay Fairfax, the National Capital Area's only weekly gay magazine featuring news, views, and pride. I'm Dave Hughes.
And I'm Beth Goodman. Each week we'll feature personalities and events of interest to gay women and men in Fairfax County.
This week, we'll attend a forum sponsored by Gays Against Abortion with guest speaker Frederica Matthews Green.
And we'll meet Gary Matthews, a gay man who was denied medical compensation and fired from his job, only because his employer found out he was gay.
But first, here's Peg McCraw with this week's gay trivia question.
Can you name 5 celebrities who have gay siblings, sons, or daughters? Stay tuned. We'll have the answer at the end of the show.
Thank you, Peg. Abortion is one of the most controversial issues facing us today. I recently attended a forum at the Charles Sumner School in Washington, D.C., sponsored by the newly formed group Gays Against Abortion. The guest speaker was a pro-life feminist, Frederica Matthews Green. As you'll see, events took an interesting turn partway through the forum.
Gays Against Abortion is a brand new organization. It only started in September of last year, 1990, at a meeting where there was a core group of gay people who were concerned for the rights and lives of unborn children. And from that point, we have progressed to the point where now we're here and we're sponsoring a forum on pro-life feminism pitched primarily to the gay and lesbian community here in Washington, D.C. This is a long overdue organization for many reasons. One is because the leaders in the gay community have chosen to side with the pro-abortion stand, and to such an extent that in many ways we're told, often explicitly and very often implicitly, if you are a gay man or a woman, then you must be in favor of abortion rights. You can't be pro-life. That's a contradiction in terms. At last we're standing up and saying, no, that's not true. The rights of gay people do not depend upon the deaths of children. That's an equation that doesn't compute, and we are now gathering together and speak and say so explicitly. We do this because we know how our own rights as gay people have been trampled on for years and years, especially and including our right just to keep on living. We are murdered in the streets, medical funding has been slashed, and too often, in desperate despair, we end up taking our own lives because we can't live in a world that so oppresses us. The mindset behind homophobia and the rationale of abortion in its effects are strikingly similar. Just like homophobia, abortion tries to get rid of real human beings who are deemed for one reason or another undesirable. Just like homophobia, abortion says that you have no place in human society and even denies your right to be alive in it. That's pretty severe. For that reason, we oppose abortion and we fight for unborn children because their rights and ours are the same human rights. This is the basis for our existence. Gays Against Abortion is not a religious organization. It has no ties whatever to any church or synagogue, any religious group, and there is no religious basis for our existence. We stand on the profound but common sense belief that all human beings deserve the guarantee of basic human rights, regardless of race, color, gender, sexual orientation, or age, whether before or after birth. And that's where we stand. We also fight not just for unborn children, but for their mothers as well. We recognize that women too often find themselves conceiving children in tragically difficult circumstances or without access to effective birth control. Oftentimes, too, women are afraid that pregnancy may jeopardize their jobs and their careers. These are real concerns. They're genuine concerns. And in fighting for these women, we also try to change the society in which we live so that women don't feel that they have to make this kind of choice that ends up in their child's death. We try to change a society in which such deaths are considered acceptable. We say no. We say no to that. We also educate straight pro-lifers. We do this because there is homophobia in the mainstream pro-life movement. We know this. Our leaders tell us this constantly. And we don't deny that. But it's there largely because these are people who have never knowingly met or worked with a gay person, male or female. They don't know who we are. And so they have no reason to challenge society's stereotypes or to question them. They just buy them wholesale because we have not taught them any better. So by working with them as openly gay women and men for the rights and lives of unborn children, they get to know us. And that's how bigotry ends, when people get to know each other. Which brings me to introducing our speaker for the Pro-Life Feminist Forum, Frederica Matthews Green. Frederica is Vice President for Communications for Feminists for Life, which is a national pro-life feminist organization headquartered in Kansas City, Missouri. And she's also the Public Affairs Associate for Education for Americans United for Life, which is the oldest public interest pro-life law firm in the country. So without further ado, again, thanking you for coming and being with us tonight, I would like to introduce Frederica Matthews Green.
In the early 1970s, I was very strongly involved in the beginnings of the new women's lib movement, as it was called, and very strongly supported abortion. It seemed to me that if women were going to control their lives, control their career lives and their general history, then they had to at least be able to control what went on inside their own bodies. And it was tautological. It was obvious that if women weren't able to control what was going on within their own bodies, then they couldn't control any other facet of their lives. And this seemed so obvious to me until I read this article that Tom referred to, where the doctor was observing the baby dying in such anguish. And it made me stop and think, because until that point, it had never occurred to me that an unborn child really was an unborn child. I thought it was just a glob of tissue. That was what they told me, and that was what I told other people, and it was a lot more convenient that way. When I began to consider that perhaps there was something more there than just a glob of tissue, it was disturbing, because it upset a lot of my beliefs, a lot of my stereotypes. Especially when I started learning these things, I realized that it was incompatible with the heart of feminism. That there was something had gone tragically wrong if we thought that this kind of violence was appropriate in trying to seek our rights and trying to seek our equality. We have made some kind of terrible mistake. Even if people don't agree that it is a human life, I think it is, but if you saw somebody doing this to a kitten, well, you'd have to say this is violence and this is wrong. This shouldn't be done to defenseless life. There's just something wrong here. And if we've made this a cornerstone of women's equality, something is wrong. We've adopted a technological, macho, violent, controlling way of dealing with human problems that says we can solve social problems, we can solve human problems by killing people. This is true, of course. You could solve the homeless problem by killing all the homeless people. You could solve the problem of hunger by shooting everybody that's hungry. It is very efficient, and it has been tried before in the history of the world. But I'm not sure that it's a method that we should be celebrating or championing. Elizabeth Cady Stanton said, "When we consider that women are treated as property, it is degrading to women that we should treat our children as property, to be disposed of as we see fit." So I laid out a couple of the reasons why I believe that feminism was incompatible with abortion. First was that it's violent. The second, that it is a violence that is inflicted on our own children. Thirdly, that it violates a woman's bodily ecology with dangerous and even life-lasting effects. Well, that's all I had to say today, but I'll be glad to take any questions.
I would like to speak personally, not only as a former abortion provider, but as someone who has chosen abortion. And I really resent people regarding the choice of abortion as an immoral choice. My choice of abortion was probably the single most moral and the single most selfless choice I've ever made in my entire life. I chose it for my family's life, for the 2 children I had adopted so that they could be raised in a decent environment, and most importantly for my own life. Not because of a whim, not because of the hard cases that you would like to talk to, but because of the hard cases that women live every day. I have not seen anyone from Feminists for Life out lobbying to change society, to make it more feminist. I have not seen you lobbying for family and medical leave.
We did.
I have not seen you lobbying. I've been around this town a long time. I have not seen you working for the Equal Rights Amendment. I have not seen you working to change men's lives. Because it's not the failure of feminism, it's the failure of men to respond to feminism. And I would like to see you stop trying to change women's rights, the right we have to life itself, and start to change men.
One of our primary allies in working for the Lesbian and Gay Civil Rights Act and working for ordinances in towns and communities across this country, the women's movement, the organized women's movement, has been one of our primary allies in that fight for dignity. And it's a fight for dignity for lesbians and gays, and that's recognized by those in the women's movement who see that women also have no dignity if they don't have choices. And also I see the potentiality of the lesbian and gay civil rights movement losing a very, very important ally in our fight.
You are standing on the backs of hundreds of thousands of women who, by advocating that the state should take away women's right to privacy, as the Supreme Court has already said to gay and lesbian people, you, because you're a gay and lesbian person, have no right of privacy. Let us now further destroy the possibility that gays and lesbians in this country will ever have equal rights. I am affronted and appalled that you stand up there and you don't define yourself. You say, we gay and lesbian people. I would challenge you to say that any even tiny, small minority of the gay and lesbian movement in this country support your stand.
Of the same mold. We're all not made out of ticky-tacky, and we all don't think just the same. And when we try to make it seem as though we all do share the same opinion, I think part of what makes this movement viable is that we allow each other to think for ourselves. It's an absolute must. We can't dictate to each other what we may or may not think. Just as I am not trying to dictate to you what you may or may not think.
Yes, you are.
No,
You're telling me what I can do with my body,
No.
and you're a white man. You are a man, period. And you're telling me that I cannot terminate a pregnancy.
The sexism of that statement aside, which I will not address, what we have to encourage in the gay and lesbian movement must be the freedom to exchange ideas and to think differently if our conscience dictates. My conscience dictates that I be against abortion and for life. The conscience of these women who are lesbian and pro-life tells them that they must be pro-life as well. They may not be told by anyone else that they can. A woman in Tampa who is lesbian and pro-life told me that one woman came up and told her to her face that if she was pro-life, she had no business being lesbian. Now, in a certain sense, that's funny because it's a ridiculous statement. On another level, a much deeper and more sinister level, that's a denial that she has the right even to consider herself a lesbian woman solely because of her position on abortion. Talk about oppression.
To say that gays, particularly male gays, are against abortion. If we look at, number one, and I'm a lesbian woman, if you look at the realities of who are opponents, those are, in other words, who you are going to tie in with, as those that oppose abortion, you have to look at your colleagues. And they are the Jesse Helms of the world. They are the religious right wing. They are the ones that stand firmly and strongly against privacy rights and against our rights as lesbians and gays to live our lives as we wish. And in fact, they usually, in all kinds of cases, are against the abortion pill. You know, they're against contraception.
That's right.
If one extrapolates it, we have to look at the leadership, the people that you're tying in with. They say that sex should only be for procreation.
Absolutely.
Isn't that why they need
Every
us?
sperm should have a name.
Right.
Every sperm should create a new baby. Well, gang, what does that do to the gay lifestyle?
The problem that I have with your position is your position takes everything away from me. Mine takes nothing away from you. You can still choose not to have an abortion, and that will be your right. But please, don't ever tell me that I'm not moral enough or intelligent enough to make that decision for myself. And when you start trying to pass legislation saying that women cannot have safe and legal abortions, that's what you're doing. That's what you're saying, and that's what upsets me.
Okay, prior to this evening, what were your expectations in hosting this forum? What did you expect to come of the evening? How did you expect that it would go?
We had not the slightest idea. Since this was the first time anything like this had been attempted, none of us had any experience. There was nothing to gauge it against, so we were just completely open, had no idea what might happen. I would have been pleased if all it had been was just a small group of people interested in hearing Frederica speak about pro-life feminism. When the other people came in, I knew right then
it was going to change. And I'm glad that it did, because one of the reasons why Gays Against Abortion exists is to illustrate the diversity of thought that does exist in the gay and lesbian community. We don't all think the same thing, and I happen to think that diversity is good, and that it's good for people to be able to say what they think. And so we had an exchange that allowed that to happen.
Great. Well, how can one get in touch with your organization, find out, you already mentioned when and where the meetings were, but to find out more about your group, is there a number to call or an address to write to?
Yes, our phone number is area 202-223-6697, and I'll repeat that again in just a second. Our mailing address is P.O. Box 33293, Washington, D.C. 20033. And again, that number is 202-223-6697.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Tom. Thank you for keeping Gay Fairfax appraised of the forum and the existence of your group.
Thank you, Dave.
Join us. The Fairfax Lesbian and Gay Citizens Association is a community organization that offers a sense of camaraderie and spirit among gay people. FLGCA sponsors various social events and fundraisers, as well as political and educational projects. Don't put it off any longer. Join FLGCA today.
For your free copy of the FLGCA newsletter, write to us at Post Office Box 2322, Springfield, Virginia 22152, or call us at area code 703-451-9528.
After Gary Matthews was injured on the job, he applied for medical compensation. But compensation was denied, and he was fired from his job, only because his employer found out he was gay. But Gary decided to fight.
Gary Matthews and David White, thank you very much for joining us on Gay Fairfax today. Now, as sort of a preface, I should explain why you are here. Well, I was minding my own business, walking down K Street, when I saw these two folks picketing out front of Delta Airlines. Curious boy that I am, I said, there's something going on here that I'd like to find out about. And that's where I found out about your discrimination case with Delta Airlines, and found out all the problems that you've had trying to get, first off, your rehabilitation, taking care of an injury you had on job, and then on top of that, all the discrimination you faced in trying to get that. Now, let's start off first, Gary, by explaining what was the chronology of events that landed you where you are right now. What happened to you at Delta Airlines?
I slipped and fell at work and injured my hand, and from that...
I see you have your brace on your hand right now, still from that.
Right. And I got carpal tunnel syndrome, which is a repetitive motion. It's a crippling disease, which is very painful, and you have it for the rest of your life, and you stay in a lot of pain, and you can't sleep at night.
Now, you'd been employed by Delta for how long before this happened?
For 19 years.
19 years. So you had an injury, you went through the procedure with the insurance company. Tell me what happened at that point.
With Delta, they sent me through Warsaw Insurance of Baltimore to several of their doctors. And in the process, they sent me to one doctor who I thought was an orthopedic doctor, and went in and he started asking me a lot of personal questions, and this lasted for a while. So about halfway through, I said, why are you asking me all these personal questions, you know? He says, well, you do realize you're here for a psychiatric evaluation. And I said, no, you know. And the next question he asked me, he says, you are homosexual, right? So before this, I'd called up, I had a lawyer who was with, who's a workman's comp lawyer, and I asked him about going to these doctors, and he said, you know, answer their questions. So I answered his question that, yes, I'm gay. And then after that, he started asking me, well, do you have a lover? How long do you live together? You know, who does your lover work for? And at that time, he worked for Paul Simon, and he was manager of the front office for Paul Simon when he was running for president.
So you were trying to get treatment for a physical ailment, and they sent you to a psychiatrist to find out more about your personal life, which really had nothing to do at all with your injury.
Right. And so he continued with the questions and asked how much my lover's salary was. He asked the question, how often do you have sex? Do you go out with other guys? We've lived together for 15 years.
And we don't go out with other guys. That's how relationships last for 15 years.
And then he asked how many brothers and sisters I had. He asked if any of them were gay. He asked me possibly if my parents had ever had a homosexual relationship, you know.
Well, now
which just has nothing to do with the carpal tunnel, right?
That's right. Now, because of this procedure, you're getting kind of suspicious as to something else going on. Now tell me, David, you said before they knew that he was gay, otherwise he wouldn't have had these questions. Now, what happened that made Delta and the insurance company to believe that, that Gary was gay?
Well, there were several instances since the injury that aroused suspicion. Very soon after he fell at work, we found that someone had hired a private investigator to come into our apartment to tell the landlord that Gary had applied for a job with the federal government, and he was there to do a background check on him, and that he wanted the landlord to let him into our apartment, which she wouldn't do. He went to several of our neighbors and gave our neighbors the same story about Gary applying for a job with the federal government. No one would talk to him, but our neighbors came back to us and told us that this guy had been snooping around. And the last person we heard from was the manager of a gym that has a largely gay clientele, where I worked out. About 6 months after we heard about this private investigator, Gary found out from the doctor whom Gary had chosen and who had been treating Gary's hand and who had diagnosed the carpal tunnel syndrome, that this doctor had gotten a phone call from a woman who claimed to be a reporter for the Washington Blade. And this woman who claimed to be a reporter said that Gary had nominated this particular doctor, Dr. David Kerfman, for the Doctor of the Year award, and that the Blade wanted to send a reporter out to his office. They wanted to do a story on him, and they wanted to run it in the paper, and they wanted to make sure that he understood perfectly that this was a gay paper and that Gary had nominated him for this award. Eventually, he wouldn't even see us any longer. I mean, it was completely inexplicable. And it just so happened that the time that the insurance company sent Gary to see the psychiatrist, who started asking him all these personal questions, coincided with the time that Dr. Kerfman decided that he wasn't going to treat Gary any further.
They said that you're all fixed. You're ready to go back to work, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you go back to work, and they tell you, no, go home, right? Is that what we were talking about before?
I go back to work, and I'm typing and stuff like that. My productivity goes down some. You have, say, between calls, you have 6 seconds or something. You have to complete all your information and your record, go back and take another call, which they want you to take, say, 80 to 120 calls a day from the public. So I went and talked with a reservations guy about this, and he says, just go home, you know, that's all I can tell you, and we'll call you later.
And therefore, they have actually fired you because you can't perform certain duties that were inherent with your job. And very briefly, isn't that the situation you're in right now?
Right.
So in the meantime, both of you have been fighting Delta.
Right.
And what are your objectives in your fight with Delta, or your publicity with Delta?
The first thing we want is for him to be put back on his benefits, and that those are very extensive with Delta. They include life insurance, medical insurance, free travel passes, significant amounts of disability payments every month. We want him put back on his benefits, and we don't want any more interference with the medical treatment that he has to have for his hand and for the complications that have arisen from that. Well, in order to do that, we have to have an attorney. We're picketing, number one, because we want people to know that Delta has done this to him. It's done it to us, and we feel like they've done it to us because we're gay, because they've looked into our private lives, they've subjected him to this utterly uncalled for psychiatric examination, and they've done everything they can, hiding behind the law, the ERISA law, to make it hard for him to get what he's entitled to after 20 years. We think people should know this. We think people should know that this is an important discrimination issue. And in a larger sense, we want people to know that big business in this country thinks that they can discriminate against gay people, and they can't. And they sure can't do it against us, because we will go to the street. We will go out there every day until we get this thing straightened out.
Discrimination affects everybody. What can people do to help them face this type of discrimination on the job?
The first thing you need to do is to find out just how your pension benefit program is set up and what your rights are under their program. Once you find that somebody is starting to meddle with your access to your benefit rights. You should take whatever steps are necessary. You should protest to management. You should protest to the Labor Department. You should just let people know that the more they try and push you around on this thing, the more of a ruckus you're going to raise.
So, again, thank you very much, Gary and Dave,
You're
for
welcome.
joining us.
Thank you.
How did you do with this week's gay trivia question? Here's Peg with the answer.
Our 5 celebrities with gay siblings are actor David Soul, the lesbian sister, singer Ronnie Blakely with a gay brother, entertainer Grace Jones with a gay brother, talk show host Morton Downey Jr., a gay brother, and actress Lana Turner with a lesbian daughter.
And that wraps up this edition of Gay Fairfax. But don't forget to tune in again next week at the same time. And now for Gay Fairfax, I'm Beth Goodman.
And I'm Dave Hughes. Thank you for joining us, and remember to keep the pride alive.